I'd like to introduce Jan, whose last name I'm afraid to try to pronounce. I'll try it anyways. Go Hubic. Okay, fair enough. Jan is an associate professor at the Department of Applied Mathematics of Charles University, a senior software developer at SUSE or SUSE Linux, and also co-founder and director of the Šetel and Vosicek Museum of Photography in Tabor, Czech Republic. In 2004, he started a project of digitization of the archive consisting of photographs taken in the years 1865 through 2008 by 3 generations of professional photographers in his family. He also curated over 20 exhibitions of photography from the archive of Šetel and Vosicek. If I pronounce that wrong, please fix that for me. Okay. As well as digitized collections worldwide. Jointly with several institutions in the Czech Republic, including the National Technical Museum, Museum of Fotalier Sedel, the National Museum of Photography, and the National Heritage Institute. He has organized a number of workshops on digitization and also 2 international workshops on early colored photography. In mathematics, Jan is currently working on problems in structural Ramsey theory. As a software developer, he is a co-maintainer of the GNU compiler collection working on interprocedural optimization, profile feedback, link time optimization, and x86-64 backends. I'd like to welcome Jan. So the clicker's there.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect it that this will be read aloud, so it's longer than I should have been. So I'm very excited to be able to speak on this conference. And let's see. Yeah, I don't see the slides. You see the slides.
Yes, you see a slide.
Mm-hmm. So can I see the slides too? So yeah. So I know where I am. Okay. Now I see the slides. Very good. So I'm going to speak on the digital reconstructions of early color photographs. And there's a joint project with Linda Gebrova, which is here, and also Doug Peterson, which you probably know, and Kendra Meyer from the American Museum of Natural History, and Geoffrey Baker from New State Library of New Wales. And actually, on the beginning, there was a cooperation with Mark Jacobs, which was a collector of early color photography. And he unfortunately passed away this February. So he left a really mature collection behind, consisting of thousands of autochromes and other early processes. So I'm in the group of people who looks for a new home for this collection. So I think that I might ask, you can contact me if you would like to know more. So what we are working on is on the additive process of color photography. So it all started with the Maxwell's experiment, at least by the modern vision of it. And in this experiment, Maxwell has asked Thomas Sutton to take photographs of the Tartar ribbon over the 3 different filters, red, green, and blue. And then they produce transparencies, and they put them into Latrans slide with corresponding colors. They was expecting to see the color photograph. So the thing looked like this. And it's pretty much like the projector worked 20 years ago, the digital projectors. So this is my attempt to reconstruct what they probably saw on the event. The experiment was not completely successful because they was lacking emulsion sensitive to red light and other things which should make it right. But it was sort of the basic principle of additive colors. So the photograph today exists in these 3 separation slides. Those are copies from Mark Jacobs' collection. And that was taken by D.A. Spencer, which was the inventor of the color printing method. And he produced a print, which is, looks like this. It's from 1929, so a long time after the experiment. And that's what you usually see in the textbooks on the history of photography. People think it's a rabbit, so they put it upside down. But it's a ribbon, so it should be rotated. So later, this process was turned into the practical process. There are a lot of interesting figures which are kind of underappreciated till today. So this is the inventor Frederick Ives. And he was able to make very successful color photographs in 1890s. And he invented this box, which is called chromoscope, which was used to see the photographs using kind of half-transparent mirrors, composing them together. So, these photographs are not as well known today as they should be, but they are sort of becoming to be known because the early color photography is really helped by the digitization. Because in 80s, you was not able to really show the photographs to anyone because the original devices was broken, and producing a color reproduction of it using the darkroom methods was very hard. So this is example of the photographer Prokudin Gorsky, which was photographing Russia for a Tsar in 1905 to 15, and after he fled the Russia, he took the collection with himself to France, and eventually it was sold to Library of Congress. And Library of Congress digitized it in 2000, and then these pictures came back to life, from completely forgotten photographer, because soon people realized that you can produce a very beautiful color pictures. So the portrait is actual color photograph by him, and so that's how it works. So this is one of the more memorable photographs he made. It's Mohammed Alim Khan. He was the last emir of Bukhara. And those are the three separation slides. And without special device, you could not really see what the color picture is, but you can easily do it in computers. So in 2004, there was already a software developed which took the full collection and turned it into color. And this is how it was presented, actually slightly earlier, hand retouched on the exhibition of Library of Congress. And it really made this photographer to be quite an internet sensation. So like in more small museum in Czech Republic, we made the first exhibition of this photographer in Europe. And we had the Lynn Brooks from Library of Congress visiting us. It really helped us because we realized, how popular such photographs are to the wide public. So I have one more example. It doesn't show. Okay, now it shows. So this is from where I took the portrait. So you can see that the picture is actually much bigger and quite beautiful. So what we are focusing on is a related process, which is called the additive screen process. And they existed in many variants, so I listed all the names, but I don't expect you to memorize them. So I will be looking mostly on budget and Dufay and Finlay color, which are the most common. So this is how it worked. So if you wanted to take a photograph, you tape together this taking screen with a negative in the darkroom. And the taking screen contains little squares or little lines of colors, RG and B. And you can see this 1 millimeter is 10 squares in this example. So it's very fine and very well printed filter. And the next step is that you took a picture in the normal camera, through this filter. Then you developed a negative. You developed a negative, and that normal black and white negative. And then you made a transparency. And this transparency, if you look on the detail, it has these little dots, which are recording the color. And this color comes back if you put a special viewing screen, which has the same color pattern. So these little dots combines with the little squares of colors, and then make the colors to go back. So this picture actually looks quite faded because the screen was developed by, manufactured by dies, which are not very stable. But you can do the last two steps in computer digitally. And you can get a color picture which is pretty close to what they saw when they did the physical process, because you can be relatively faithful on approximation of the screen. So I have a big version of it. This is a picture from 1916. It's in the collections of American Museum of Natural History, taken by Yvette Borup Andrews. And it exists both in the negative and in the positive, which is a great advantage to us. So we can see, how our process compares to the original. And I think you can see that the colors are actually quite beautiful, and they are recorded quite correctly. There's the blues and reds and greens and the skin tones and neutral colors. And if you look on the detail, it shows quite nice picture, which could be much later than 1916. And this is how it compares, the original original transparency to the digital reconstruction. And there's no Photoshop editing or something to improve the colors. That's really how it comes out from the simulation. So that's the thing that's why I'm very excited to speak here, because I hope that more collections like this will be found. You know, they are not very easy to find, especially the negatives looks like normal negatives unless you scan them on the high resolution and you look for the dots. So there might be a lot of other collections which are not identified yet. So I would like to speak a little bit about the process. So the registration of the viewing screen is the interesting part, because you need to put the picture on the top. And it works in the way that you need to put it very carefully. So here, the screen is not put correctly. And there's a small rotation which you can calculate. It's 0.5 degrees to the up. And if you corrected it well, then you would see something like this. But you can't because it's rotated. So this is what you do digitally. You know, you can simulate the rotation of the screen. You can simulate the translation of the screen, which also needs to be right. You know, otherwise you get the Star Trek pictures. And you have to simulate a lot of other programs, because we are no longer doing these contact copies, but we are having these high-tech devices with lens inside. And they are able to do different transformation, like they do scaling if the distance is not correct. You know, they do perspective distortion if the glass plate doesn't lay perfectly flat. And they do a lot more. So we have developed an open source tool which is able to do all these corrections for you, and you get the colors. So we are with Linda about to make a first release, which should be easy to use and make this happen. So yeah, so this is the tool. You load it in, and then you press a couple buttons, and you get the color picture. You know, I don't have time to show it in bigger details, but I can show it offline for anyone who is interested. The next part is that if you have the color pictures, you need to show them. And this is actually a very precise simulation of the original screen. And I don't know how you see it, but it looks differently on every projection, because these little dots doesn't show correctly on model screen. You know, it's dim and it's not saturated enough. And if you take a look on the color screen photographed from the original's transparency, it actually looks better. But it looks better because the picture is bad. I know you can see that there are white colors in the little squares. And they should not be there, because every place of the picture is covered by one of the basic colors. So there should not be any white in the picture. And also, the scan is autofocus, and that makes the colors to blend together and look better, actually. So one way is to blur the picture and to do something about it. The other way is to notice that this is actually very similar to digital camera, because the filter looks like this. And this is the Bayer filter used in the CCD chips. And if you rotate it 45 degrees, you get the same pattern, except that the green and blue have different positions. And that means that you can use the standard methods of demosaicing to get a smooth color picture with all the colors in every pixel, which is possible to show and print. You can also do a little bit better, because you can try to recover some details, because the resolution of this picture is something like 0.6 megapixel if you do it in the digital way from individual squares. So you can do better. You know, this picture is not particularly sharp, so it doesn't help, but there are other pictures where you can recover details which are smaller than the little squares in the screen. Okay, the thing is that there are collections of the negatives. We know only a few. There's one in the Library of Congress. There is this one in the American Museum of Natural History. And we don't know of many more. So for 10 years, I was looking for more collections, and they are really hard to find, but I hope they must exist somewhere. So like yesterday, we have seen one. What you can do, you can start from the transparencies. And the important observation is that the screens are transparent in infrared spectra, which is not a surprise. That's a property of the dyes, which are used in most of the color photography processes. And that means that you can photograph the transparency with infrared camera. What you get the black and white picture, which is sitting under the screen, removing the screen, which is by now broken and not working correctly. So this is example which I bought on the eBay, and I sent it to DT, and they photographed it on the high-end setup. And you can see that's the color scan of the picture, and on the right-hand side is the infrared scan. So what you get is, let me see if it goes. Yeah, now it goes. So this is how the picture looks today. I have it with me, so I can show it to you if you ask me. This is the infrared scan, and this is the digital reconstruction of it, which shows much more colors than the previous picture. You can see it's not perfectly fine. It's on the flat side because it's an amateur picture, but I believe that is how it looked like when it was new. Definitely much better than it looks today. And for example, you can see that there are these red and orange plants, and they are not really visible in the original picture anymore because the screen doesn't replay them anymore. So this is my attempt to use the Photoshop to recover some of the colors, and I didn't succeed to make a difference between the pink and the orange. And you can see the reason, because if you look on the detail, then the screen has somehow lost the green colors in it. But if you look on the infrared, you can see that these dots are different on the top petal, which is red, and on the bottom petal, which is orange. You can see that there are different patterns, and you can read those patterns, and you can see that the course is there. It's not invented. So this is how the process works, and I think I have something like 5 minutes. Yeah. So I would like to speak about digitization a little bit. So this is relatively special because we are really doing some kind of physical simulation which is based on the scan instead of normal image processing. So the first thing is that you obviously need a big enough resolution to scan the little pattern. And for this particular process, it seems that 2000 ppi is enough. More resolution gets you better recovery of these small details. But this is not very high. But there are other screen processes which has the property that the dots are much smaller, like in autochromes or Dufay colors, and then you need correspondingly higher resolution. So you can actually calculate, you can see that if the dots are 2 pixels, the recovery is not very good. If the dots are 8 pixels, the recovery is pretty reliable. The next thing is that in many digitized collections, you are keeping only the files which has been already digitally improved. So some sharpening happened, some inversion to negative to positive happened, and then we lose the information which we are using because we are really interested in the ratio of the densities of the little squares, and all this digital processing is dangerous. So it does things which we cannot undo and get to the original raw files. So it's very good to keep the scans as close as to the original as possible and calibrate it, which I have seen these density targets are very useful. So the next thing is that you need a good enough resolution. On the left-hand side is the Epson scanner, which is a relatively affordable scanner which can be used. And some of the pictures you will see was done using that scanner. But you can see that it's on the borderline of being able to recover the screen pattern. On the right-hand side is a scanner with much better lens, which gets very sharp patterns. So like the DT scanners can do, like on the right-hand side, but I didn't have the corresponding scan, so I couldn't use it. So this is example of the reconstruction. On the left-hand side is a soft image from Epson. On the right-hand side is a sharp image of DT, and you can see that the saturated colors makes a huge difference. So if I didn't have the sharp scan, I would be probably happy with the soft scan. But this way I can see that there is a big difference between colors. Okay. The next thing is that you need to use the infrared channel, even though it's possible to avoid it in the kind of emergency where you can estimate what happened in the infrared without having it. And the next thing is that you need good enough density because the slice seems to be very dense, which surprised me because I have experience with scanning on Epson, and for black and white emulsions it's pretty good in most cases. And the next thing is that because the scanners are not designed for this job, they they need to be tested. They have different errors, different mistakes which you don't expect. And also the heat is very important. I was testing this filter, which was a good filter on the beginning of my test, and after scanning it peeled like this by itself. Because it's very thin, and yeah, I didn't expect this to happen. I feel sorry to it, but that's what happened. So be careful about heat. And it's very good to have some documentation what you did, because I spent a lot of time studying the text like this and trying to understand the errors. So I have some, like 2 minutes to show you some examples. So this is the examples from the Yvette Borup collections. This is Roy Chapman Andrews, who organized the expedition to Asia. The pictures comes from that. So he's collecting animals for scientific reasons. There are Tibetans there are some local hunters. There are pictures from Japan. And I like this one because it has this big difference between shadows and lights. Even though this is not a perfect scan, I think if the thing is scanned better, the colors would be better. This is Nikon. And another picture from China, pagodas. And I would like to get to the next photographer. This is a Chinese wife. Yeah, I especially like this picture because there's so many different colors in one composition. And if you see it black and white, it's completely different story than what you see here. And those are examples of Dufay color process. So I bought those on eBay, so I don't know who made them, but they are professionally made Dufays from 30s. And this is how it looks like, and this is how it looks like when you do the color reconstruction. So that's probably pretty close to the original look of the picture. So I have a couple examples of those. So this one was able to date. It's a Lion Gate, and it's taken in January 39 because of the leather appears on different picture, which is dated to that month. Maybe the leather was there for a long time, but I don't think so. And this is examples which are local here from the Library of Congress, which was our original collection. We discovered it with Mark sort of by accident. I thought those are half-tone prints. So those are sort of early experiments. And then there are really interesting set of pictures from the trip to Africa from 1930s, which I think is really recording not only in color. Those are often the first pictures of the places taken in color on black and white. This one is a pair, original slide and reconstruction. It's based on the scans which was made over 10 years ago, and I hope they will be done again because there is a freedom for improvement. So this is the other example with the positive, and I will show this one because it was the first picture I ever got in color, so I was very surprised. And I think this is a real picture, and this is a hotel where Agatha Christie wrote the same year the death on the Nile. Okay, so this is probably all I can show. So thank you very much for your attention.
Do we have any questions for Jan? Mr. Doug.
So Jan, one of the things I've found most interesting working with you is the potential that people in this room have items in their collection that are monochrome to the eye, right? Mm-hmm. You just hold the piece of film up to the air and you look at the light and it's a black and white negative. But it's actually color mm-hmm. if it was run through this process.
Exactly.
So could you go back, I don't know if you can go backwards in slides, to one of the ones with the circles? Because it's not the only potential item in the collection that would have the circles.
Exactly. No, I
the other button can go
last
backwards,
one.
Right?
No, I don't know how to get back to be. Mm-hmm.
There should be the other button on there, should go backwards.
Yeah, I'm doing it, but I somehow managed to get to the end of the presentation. Now I need to go very far, but here should be the
so like this image here, if this was in black and white in your hand, mm-hmm. the circles on the left and the right would be black and white, but the color is encoded spatially in this image. So with a physical viewing screen, that's probably not with the negative anymore mm-hmm. all this time later, or with the digital viewing screen using your OpenSO software, this becomes color. I just want to point out to everybody, you need to talk to your people who have film collections in your institution and ask them if they've ever come across those dots, because if so, not only do you have a color image that's being masquerading as black and white, but you have an extraordinarily early color image of something that could potentially be the only color image we have in the world of that thing, or of an event, or of a place. And I think that is truly profound. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
point out those little dots.
Yeah, actually, I should probably say that this was really accidental discovery for us. We was making the exhibition of black and white pictures, and I noticed those squares on the scans, and I thought they are copies of the halftone, of postcards or something. And I complained to Mark because he's a collector. He didn't know what these circles means. So without him, we would never notice this.
And I also
fact.
wanted to remind you to talk about Mark's collection and
Yeah.
it needing housing.
Yeah, it needs housing, so I would be very happy if you speak to me about that.
How many images in that collection?
It's over 2,000 autochromes and other items. So, and they are really very carefully curated. So they are, very important autochromes, early autochromes by Lumières before the production of the process. Gladworthy, Stiglitz, Steichen. It's an important collection.
Ian, do we have any online questions?
Yes, question from the virtual audience. Were Paget and other color taking and viewing filters, how are they manufactured? Sorry, let me rephrase that. How were Paget and other color taking and viewing filters manufactured? Was it manual weaving process for the color matrix?
Yeah, the manufacture was in the way that you made the emulsion, either gelatin or collodion, and then you dyed it in one color, like blue, and then there was kind of roller which was putting the grease on the top of the emulsion, and then you bleached the parts which was not covered by fat, and then you dyed it with different color, and then you did it again, and you put in the thread color. So that's probably the manufacture process of all these screens. But I'm not completely sure. I know that, for example, Dufay was developed this way. And also that seems to be the reason why the dyes are not so stable, because you needed to be able to bleach them repeatedly. So, yeah, that's a good question.
We have time for just a couple more questions, and we'll move on to the next speaker.
Hi, this was great. Do these negatives vary in size, or are they pretty consistent?
Well, they depends, they was usually taped exactly to the filter, and the filters was sold in a couple of sizes, like the Magic Lantern and 13 to 18 centimeters and so on. But for example, the Frank Hurley pictures, which I didn't show, he actually cut it to the filter to be smaller. So yeah, they vary in the size.
And if you hold it up, can you see the dot screen or the?
I cannot anymore. Maybe if my eyes was good enough, yeah.
With a 4x loop
yeah.
or an 8x loop, you could see.
Yeah, if you see the viewing screen, you sort of see the pattern because it's very pronounced. But on the negative, you don't see it anymore, I would say. Not, well, at least unless you have superhuman eyes. But you can easily see it under magnification. 0.1 millimeter is not that small.
So I think if I gathered things right, the taking and viewing screens are the same? Or are they different screens?
Yeah, they are slightly different because the taking screen is usually less saturated and the viewing screen is more saturated to make the process faster.
Okay.
So you can use the same screen, but they use different screens.
Okay.
To
And so the
get
screens are
better.
film-based, and so are there issues? How did you account for understanding what that 100-year-old film might be in terms of fading and all this sort of stuff? This is all a big deal, right? So were the screens the same film process as the film on which they were used with, or so that maybe they faded kind of together over time?
I think it depends. Like the Paget and Finlife, they are really independent objects. You can open the picture and take them apart. And usually both of them are gelatin-based things on the glass. If you have, for example, Dufay, then it's all in one emulsion on the film base. And then one is in the collodion and the other is gelatin. So they are really combining different methods.
And you have spectral measurements of some of those dyes.
Yeah, we have special measurements of some of those dyes, which is important to get the original colors. We don't have all of them yet. They are hard to find, and because they were sort of protective about the details of the process, so it's hard to find the original formulations. But we have sort of guesses what it should be based on the other processes around.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.